Our manufacturing businesses did about 25 million last year. Nexus Point's just kind of getting up and running over the last year, so we'll hit a couple million this year. I'm big on cash flow, right? Maybe it's my real estate background. And so what I really want to do is I want to create awesome services, right? Like I care about like the name and the brand recognition and like what that means to a consumer. And I'm not that interested in a back end sale. I really want to just get it, have consistent cash flow. So to your point, I can hang out with my kids and go to lunches. And if I want to work on a Friday, I work on a Friday.
Yo, what is up, everybody? My name is Matt Drouin. I am the host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors Podcast. I am psyched out of my mind today. I have a very special guest, Mr. Mike O'Connor, an entrepreneur at heart. Mike O'Connor left his 6-figure corporate job with a Fortune 100 company and built a 7-figure business in less than 2 years focused around real estate. Mike acquired 180 units and built a vertically integrated real estate business around these units: management, construction, brokerage, landscaping, the whole 9 yards. By the age of 34, Mike had built and sold several businesses across different industries with a portfolio exceeding $30 million in annual revenue. He is recognized as a thought leader in sales, marketing, and business development. Now he gets to spend his time doing what he loves most, helping entrepreneurs scale quickly and cost effectively to hit their business and personal goals. In a pivot from real estate, Mike founded Nexus Point, an international talent sourcing firm focused on connecting small and medium-sized businesses with high-level employees. He believes every entrepreneur can accomplish more if they're supported by talented people who are aligned to their vision and goals, which I do want to focus on the end of the show as to how Mike parlayed that into his real estate experience and his corporate experience in terms of what he's doing now. So, Mike, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Matt. Excited about it. And real estate's really the foundation of all of that. So I'm excited to dive into some of these projects and deals.
Absolutely. So you were born and now you're here. What happened in between?
Oh, a lot's happened in between. So I'm the product of a kid who grew up moving every 2 years, right? I was never out of school for more than 2 years. So I was the guy who was forced in 6th grade to go sit at lunch and figure out where I was sitting and talk to people. And, middle schoolers are kind of mean. So I always joke with people that I could talk to a wall if I needed to because I was forced to be personable. So moved around my entire life, went to the University of Georgia. And that's when kind of some of the more relevant things started happening, right? I always had an entrepreneurial mind growing up. I was a kid that was selling burned CDs out of his locker in 7th grade, selling lemonade on the corner in elementary school. And they, got to the University of Georgia, where I ultimately graduated and went ahead and got one of your typical corporate jobs, right? It was at a big consulting company. And I quickly jumped from job to job to job and realized that, hey, it's not the job that's causing me to jump. It's like what I've got inside of me. I wanted to accomplish something more. And this was fortunately in the time of around 2012 when I started buying real estate, when the market was just in a really awesome opportunities. And so I started buying real estate when I was at my corporate job. And, we can kind of dive into it. I don't want to kind of, jump into it too much, but really ratchet it up and use that as my launch pad to not only quit my corporate job, but then become an entrepreneur and, financially independent.
Mike, I want to kind of back up a little bit. Like, what was sort of like the seminal moments of maybe it was you going back and your memories of, selling burned CDs out of your locker and that sort of thing. Like, I don't know, what was the seminal moment with that caused you to make that leap out on your own? Because that's a pretty hard transition of, leaving corporate life.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that go into it, man. It's interesting, right? Because, I'm a firm believer that people think that a job is security. I think it's quite the opposite, right? When you have someone else who's controlling your destiny, you have no security whatsoever. You might be in a really good company, be a high performer with a good boss, but a couple of things move out of your direction and you could be left holding the bag. So I've always firmly believed that I wanted to control my own destiny. I've also somewhat struggled with having some level of authority my entire life. Like, I was always a little rebellious, getting in trouble at school, like kind of pushing the envelope. And so when I went to a corporate job, it was a big consulting company, Capgemini, then Ernst & Young. If you've ever been around those companies, it's very hierarchical. You do what your boss says. And the reason your boss is oftentimes they've been there just a little longer than you. So I just very quickly got that itch. And real estate to me was just such a fascinating concept, right? Because there's so many ways that you can go in and you could drive value, right? It's as long as you kind of buy right and you do things the right way and look in the right areas and for the right projects, you can just build such great cash flow, such great wealth. And so I saw that opportunity. I was like, I'm going to pursue that. And credit to sites like Bigger Pockets and communities like Bigger Pockets, like that's really what accelerated my knowledge and my comfortability in that space. And Yeah, it was great. Looking back at that first deal, the amount of analysis I did for like my first little single family home, it's kind of funny, but it's what ultimately gave me the tools to continue to grow from there.
So who gave, I mean, we were talking in the green room about how you made a transition from a single family to, pretty decent sized multifamily. Like what caused that to happen? Like who gave you the permission to do that? Because all of us are trained on like, all right, it's like the monopoly thing, right? All right, you establish a monopoly and then you can build houses. And then once you build 3 houses, then you can build hotels and that sort of thing. So there's a sort of
Yeah.
like progression type of thing there. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've always been a little bit of a ready, fire, aim guy, right? So that's important to note that I'll jump into things a little quicker than some. But I bought my first house in 2012, which was my own personal residence, and like kind of almost like really at that bottom. I think it peaked out in like April of that year, and I think I bought in May or something like that. And then I bought my first single family rental with a partner of mine the following year. And we kind of sat on it for a little while and kind of practiced. I mean, we were literally doing all the handyman stuff ourselves. We were screening the tenants, like we were doing everything. It was a very hands-on process. But there was a guy who was a mentor of ours. His name was Eric Halverson. He's an Atlanta-based real estate investor, and he's doing this a lot longer than us and had been in some bigger deals. And we kind of got the itch to where we went to him and said, "Hey, we're thinking about upgrading. It's like a duplex, triplex, quadplex. Do you have anything? Do you have access to anything?" And he kind of jokingly said, "Well, no, I got a 32 unit and a 240 unit." And I'll never forget, I was grilling steaks for me and my wife. I was like, "Oh, thanks." Like, hung up the phone. I was just like, "Well, why not?" Right? Like, maybe bring in a couple more partners. And so I called him back. And I was like, what are the economics on it? We started talking through it, and my partner and I realized we need to bring in 2 more guys, and we can kind of dive into the deal more if that makes sense. But we jumped at it, and when we told him that we were jumping at it, he said, "Okay, we'll sell it to you, but I also don't." He's like, "No offense, I don't believe that you'll be able to close on it. So I'm going to continue to renovate this property as if you're not buying it. And if and when the time comes that you close, we'll just add in those construction costs to the purchase price and call it a deal." So it was kind of that fluid. Um, and, and not to just keep diving right in, but we got 32 units for $640,000 back in 2014 or 2015, which, you know, it needed some work. It used to be a transitional housing place. It was a C-class area in Marietta, Georgia, which is like North Atlanta. So there was some value add opportunity that was there, and there was a little bit of hair on the deal. But by and large, it had a waiting list. People wanted to rent there. It was in a great spot. And so it was a really cool deal.
So the opportunity came from some type of relationship you had. Um, a mentor. Where did that relationship come to in terms of like this person had access to larger deals and that sort of thing? I mean, I just want to kind of talk about the origin of that actual relationship and how that came about.
Yes, I'm a firm believer, especially in the real estate space, that you should, like, without being obnoxious, like talking to people about what you do is such an important thing because you never know who you're going to come across. It might be someone with deal flow. It might be a contractor. It might be someone, a partner, right? And so talking about what you're doing is important. And that's how we got to this person. He was a friend of my business partner's friend, if that makes sense, who literally was willing to take coffee with a couple of young guys who didn't know what they were talking about to talk real estate. And so he's the one who kind of guided us through that first house purchasing process, and really he let us abuse his time, if I'm being honest with you. But we were always big on saying, what can we do for you? Like, how can we pay this back to you? And that was huge as we got started.
So your partner, I mean, where did your partner come from? I mean, did they like just materialize out of thin air, or were they like a childhood friend of yours? Were they a work colleague? Tell me about that.
He was a fraternity brother of mine, and I always kind of laugh. We weren't really friends in college. He was 2 years older than me. We were associates, though, right? So the best way to describe it is, if we ran into each other, we'd hang out. But if we were both bored on a Friday night, neither one would think to call the other person. We ended up working together at Capgemini right out of college. And when I was on my honeymoon, he saw me on the instant messaging system. He's like, "What are you doing working right now? Like, this is like, you should be on your honeymoon, like hanging out." I was like, "I'm looking for a house, like a rental property." He's like, "I've been doing the same thing." He's like, "When you get back, let's sit down and work this through." So we literally had cubicles like 10 yards away from each other. And we would just like share spreadsheets back and forth all day of deals and opportunities and things. And it was a lot of fun.
So your relationship started with him maybe hazing you when you were pledging this fraternity.
Essentially, yeah. He was the president of the fraternity, actually. So he was the one that was like trying to keep all of us freshmen like in line. He had his hands full, that's for sure.
Okay, okay. Yeah, at least he wasn't your pledge master. That would be a tough one. So,
Exactly.
all right, cool. So, you got this opportunity, 32 units. It looks like, the thing must have been hammered and maybe not in a great area. So $600,000. Tell me about the capital stack and how you went about putting this thing together from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, it was actually 640,000, and we actually had some pretty cool funding options that I'm not sure quite exist today. So, kind of backing up, it was my partner and I, and we still like we were pretty broke at that point in time, right? So we brought in two more partners. They were both, maybe a little more experienced than us, to be, in the deal with us, and we literally split our own capital four ways, right? And so I'm a big believer, especially in real estate, of bringing a team around you, right? It just helps accelerate things, gives you like the confidence to make the right decisions. And so that's what this did for us. We were actually able to go to BB&T and secure 80% financing on this deal, right? Which is huge, right? It's hard to find that these days. We had it amortized over 20 years. I think with a 5-year balloon on it is what the deal was, if I remember correctly. So a pretty awesome deal. It was 32 units split across 3 buildings, and it had deed restrictions on it, right? So it had a little bit of hair on it, and a nonprofit was running it for many years, where they would use it as like transitional housing for women and children that were getting off the streets and getting acclimated into the real world. And there were these 750 square foot units. They were all the exact same thing, one after one after one after one. It was actually in decent shape. We had to renovate about 8 of the units, but what was interesting about it was they had deed restrictions. So I had to cater to certain percent had to cater to low income, some had to cater to very low income, and some catered to market rent. But what we quickly realized when looking at the deal is even if at that very low income level, you're still not hitting the ceiling. Like you still couldn't rent it out for that amount if you wanted to. So the deed restrictions really had no impact on us throughout the process. But back to your question about the financing, we came across so many different hurdles throughout the entire process because they found, oh, there's deed restrictions. Oh, there's this. Oh, there's that. I remember reading a grainy 80-page deed on this property, trying to figure out like, are we getting into some crazy thing or not? And come to find out, we had a good deal on our hands.
Yeah. So for those people that don't know, these deed restrictions, they had an affordable housing component that was essentially required with this. So maybe getting a little bit granular here, I want to talk about how you actually, procured those partners, those capital partners to take this deal down. But is there did these burn off? Did these burn off, or was he basically deed restrictions that were like permanent deed restrictions in this property?
Yeah, they burned off, but the burn off date was like 2032, I think is what it was. So we were buying it expecting that to be a thing for the entire time of our ownership. And then as far as we found the partners, bigger pockets. It wasn't just bigger pockets being on the forums. It was like actually going to like the local meetups and events and things like that and networking. And then back to my earlier point, talking about what we're doing. I had this deal. I couldn't quite do it myself. And people became very interested and the right people came out of the woodwork. So, talking about what we're doing was extremely helpful.
So people you had never met before out of bigger pockets, or somebody that you maybe have met at a networking function?
Yeah, that's correct. So it was me and my partner and 2 guys that we had never met before. We, obviously did some vetting on them. We met with them multiple times, realized that we had aligned values. They were good people. We didn't necessarily do reference checks per se, but we kind of did a little bit of QAing and kind of talking to people behind the scenes, and everything checked out and turned out to be an awesome partnership.
This is super interesting. I want to lean into this because you're the first person that got capital partners together like strictly through bigger pockets. A lot of people go the friends and family route, professional contacts, people that already have an arm's length transaction with. So train me and our listeners on exactly how you did that, from forum postings to all that stuff, just to the best of your knowledge or best of your memory.
So 100%. So we actually did attempt a little bit of the friends and family element for people that weren't in real estate. And I remember to this day, some really sharp people that were in banking and finance thought we were crazy buying a value add kind of C-class asset. Like in late 2014 is when this was deals being put together. People thought we were crazy. And so, don't underestimate the power and the intelligence of people that are really in it all day, which is bigger pockets. So we were active on the forums, but really what we were doing is we were going to these meetups, right? We were there were local meetups at the time where you could go and just have, there would be a speaker and then a meet and greet. And we were just, again, it's not rocket science. It's just being intentional about talking about what your objectives are, knowing what you're looking for, knowing what your weaknesses, and then knowing what you have on your hands, right? Because the smart people, if you're doing this, they're going to sit there and they're going to pepper you with questions pretty quick, and you've got to have answers. And we did, fortunately, because we spent a lot of time diligencing this. So what I would tell listeners is, get out from behind just your computer, right? You're not gonna put deals together sitting in your office or sitting in your house on your couch, right? You're gonna do it getting face to face. You can instantly build more trust and credibility with people. And so we met a couple of people that we really liked that had good reputations. Took them to the property, did walkthroughs. We saw the way they were thinking about the asset. We had an understanding of what their background was. And so again, just getting out there and being intentional with your conversations.
Great. How did the conversation go? Like when you first met them, were you like, "Hey, I have this deal. I need help." Were you kind of like, did you pitch slap them at one of these meetups? Tell me what your like methodology was for that.
Yeah, no. The guy's name was Aziz. Aziz Khan was the guy, and I was actually talking with someone different. I couldn't remember who it was. I'm like, oh, you need to talk to Aziz because he's big in the multifamily space. He's got X, Y, and D deals that he's accomplished, and so I recognize his name because he was pretty active in the Atlanta chapter. Went up and talked to him and said, hey, so and so suggested that we talk. I've got this deal in Marietta, Georgia. I'd love for you to take a look at it. And kind of one thing into another, he did his analysis. He asked me a bunch of questions. I remember having late night calls where we're pouring through spreadsheets. And he's like, I'd be really interested in partnering on this deal with you. Like, what do you guys think? I said, yeah, we need it to make it happen. And if you recall, we had a little bit of a leeway with the seller because we knew the seller. He was our mentor. And his whole thing was, I'm going to operate this as if I'm owning it. So I think we had a diligence period on this before we went under contract of like 2 months, right? Like way more patience than most people would give you, but it was off market. The guy only kind of half believed us anyway. And then when we came to him with like a formal offer and financing in hand, he's like, oh, okay, cool. So it was a fun process.
Awesome. So how did you structure the partnership with the ownership group? Like, was it just pro rata to capital put into this deal? Like, tell me about all that stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be a boring answer for this one. It was as simple as it is. We basically just, you put what you put in is what you get. And so there was four of us, 25, 25, 25, 25. Each one of us brought a little more to the table. There was another guy named Kieran who had more experience. And so he was more in charge of kind of like he wasn't the one that was going on the property and checking on it and investigating. He had like more P&L responsibility, so to speak. And so we ended up just dividing and conquering a little more on our roles and responsibilities. Myself and Matt were the more junior of the two partners. We were doing more like interfacing with management, walking on site. And this is before we started our own management arm, by the way. So we had third-party management that we were constantly engaging with and kind of QAing. We learned a lot in doing that. And then Aziz was pretty good with the renovations. And so we divide and conquer really well. It was a team that like for four guys who kind of didn't really know each other, came together and had a multi-year run doing deals together.
So let's get technical a little bit. So you have, this is the first partnership where we have 25, 25, 25, 25. So did you all have to sign personally on the debt with BB&T?
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, like again, like there's probably more creative ways we could have gone about this, knowing that we had a really good deal on our hands, but we didn't know any better. We just want to get the deal done and move forward. And so it's like, we weren't focused on being greedy or biting off more than we could chew. And ultimately, I'm happy we did it that way because we got a lot out of the other partners in the deal, right? They weren't just passive. Everyone was a GP in the deal, all signed on in the debt.
Excellent. Moving this deal forward, you close on it. Take me forward through the story on this opportunity.
Yeah. So it was an evolving process, right? Because we had about 8 units that still needed to be renovated and a wait list of about 30 people. And so all the units weren't fully occupied. And again, we had money, but we didn't have like a ton of money. We couldn't go and just do like $100,000 renovation. So even with the wait list, we were waiting to get people filled and then we'd renovate a unit. And so for the longest time, we weren't cash flowing this thing just because any cash that came in, we would put back in the deal. I remember my buddy was getting married and he had a bachelor party in Vancouver and I had to skip it because like 4 HVACs went out like the week before. And I was cash strapped at the time, right? Like I was pumping everything I had at this thing. And so there was a slow transition of getting people into those new units. And then there was a slow transition of getting people up to market rent because I forget what the caps were, but it was, in like the 700 or 800 a unit. And you had people in these places paying $525, $450. And so there was that steady thing of, okay, I don't want to go and just do raising of all the rents and have this place be completely vacant and then have to renovate all of it. And so we were kind of like dipping our toes in the water slowly but surely, pushing rents up, renovating units, and trying to transition kind of the feel of the neighborhood. Um, Fortunately, the guy who sold it to us did a good bit of the renovation, tacked on the purchase price. It's funny that you said 600,000. That was originally the price, and then it got bumped up to 640. So he helped. We were able to finance that, which was obviously very beneficial.
Yeah. So you mentioned some learning experiences with third-party management. This is the problem with properties of this size, right? 32 units, especially if you're establishing a new foothold in a market, value add opportunity. I have my own experiences. I'll let you tell your own through that.
Yeah. So starting with the end, I ended up creating my own property management company just because I was so dissatisfied with what I was getting. 32 units, like you said, is a really awkward size property, right? Not many people are really good at managing what I would call those mid-sized multis. And what is that? Let's say maybe 16 to 50 units, right? You could argue that what that range is. And the reason is some people are either so sophisticated they're doing 100 unit plus full-time management, or they're doing the single family kind of fractionalized all over the city. And we ran into so many issues. So we originally hired a company that was massive, that was used to doing the larger stuff. So they were sitting someone on site 3 days a week on our property. And we realized that person was doing nothing but sitting in the office, giving tenants someone to complain to. And so we parted ways with them and hired a new company, but tried the same model. That wasn't working either. And so we very quickly realized that this could be run on a remote basis. And so this is about the time when we were starting our own management company, but we started this with another third-party company where no on-site management. We worked with things like Rently lockboxes, for example. We had a roving maintenance guy who would kind of come around and check on things once a week to make sure things were good. But the management stuff's really hard too, because people don't manage assets as if they're their own, right? That was our whole shtick as when we started our management company, was we will manage a portfolio as if we were owners, because we were owners first. We weren't some real estate agent who couldn't hack it during the recession and was looking for a way to bring in income. It's like, no, we were investors who were crazy and dumb enough to get into doing management. And so, the list of things goes on. We would look and find past due water bills, past due electricity bills, delinquencies were through the roof, and work orders were not getting done, and they were simple things that just required communication. Property management is all about just communicating with your vendors, with your tenants, with government agencies if necessary, and that just wasn't getting done.
Rently lockboxes. Tell me about that, because I haven't heard that name before.
Rently lockboxes are like a remote showing system. So basically, you can put this lockbox on a door, and it integrates with the online application that syndicates out to Zillow and all the different sites, where people can get like a one-time code where they could punch it in, put their ID and their debit card in, and they can self-show the property. They got to be really careful with those, because scammers will go and do that, put it up on Craigslist for a ridiculously low rate, get someone in there in 48 hours. So there's a lot of kind of controls that we put in place when we were managing. But what's great is like that eliminated the need for someone to be on site, sit there and show the units. People could self-show. And then we would just do batch work orders on the maintenance side. And it really, at the property of that size, eliminated the need to have on-site management.
Yeah, excellent. I'm in New York State, so I'm like thinking like, okay, give access to it, and there's going to be either a Craigslist scammer or a squatter that's going to move in with 12 people. With 12 people.
We're talking Atlanta, man. Same problems, when we ran the management company, we had someone whose one of their job duties was morning, lunch, and dinner, or before dinner, checking Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace to make sure that our stuff wasn't getting reposted. And we'd see it and we'd dispatch. We'd have to go do lock changes all the time, but it was cheaper than having someone sit on site doing nothing all day just for like one or two showings.
Yeah, one of the things that we do is that we don't do that for because we have some fears in Rochester, New York, because we've had properties straight up stolen from us before. But what we do is like we do a super comprehensive like photos, video walkthrough, and we require an application before you even see the property. And so by the time we have somebody that sees it, like they're already familiar with it, they're familiar with the area, and they're like ready to go. All they have to say is like, yes, right? So, but we have a cluster of, scattered site properties that are larger commercial properties all around the same area. So we have the economies of scale to do that. But I have some people that look in other markets that need to put in remote management, because sometimes remote management is better than third-party management, I've seen in my experience.
Yeah, 100%. Have you seen those Matterport walkthroughs that you can do now?
Oh yeah.
I mean, those are game changers as well. I mean, you can kind of click through and walk as if you're, actually seeing the property, which is great.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, Mike, take me through to the finish line on this deal. You got through some management issues. You learned a lot in the process. Kind of like take me through the rest of the business plan on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of simple. I mean, I can't take too much credit because, again, the market was rising, especially for mid-sized multis at this time. And we actually ended up exiting this asset in 2018, 2019. So we bought it for 640. We exited it for 1.8, which was a good win. But even then, we left. The market was feeling a little frothy to me. I mistimed it, admittedly. The guy who bought it from us turned around, renovated more, and sold it for, I think closer to 3, right? So the thing just kept getting traded up, and we cash flowed it. It stayed consistently full. It was just you couldn't have been more grateful for a win on a first big deal, which is not the same as our second deal. If we want to get into that, we had like the opposite experience on it. But it turned out great. We cash flowed it well. We formed a good partnership. It gave us the foundation of starting our management and kind of ancillary business services. It was just a phenomenal launch pad to kind of where I am today. So I'm very grateful for it.
So this experience, what did it teach you moving forward, and how you applied that in as it pertains to your real estate business and other businesses that you've started since then?
Yeah, and so kind of just like playing off the theme of the show of going big, right? People got to realize that the amount of time it takes to analyze a small deal and manage a small deal and deal with a small deal is oftentimes the same as a larger deal, right? The numbers are bigger, the units are larger, perhaps some more complexities, but at the end of the day, kind of the exposure and the risk, if underwrote properly, are all the same. So it taught me not to be afraid to just kind of jump in and go for the bigger asset, right? I mean, the amount of things that this asset allowed us to do, we were able to elevate the value quickly. We got a line of credit against it that we then used to buy another property, right? We were able to, cash flow it phenomenally. We were able to, exit it well and make a big pop at the end. You can't do that with just a random single family home or even a duplex. But again, to my earlier point, the amount of time I spent analyzing that first home I bought, is probably less than this. And with a multifamily too, not to keep, going on in this, but there's more that you can do to drive value in it, right? It's more like you're operating a business. You can look at your P&L, you can figure out where you're wasting money, where things are leaking out, and you can tighten it up. And it's not just a comp-based real estate system, right? You're actually running to a cap rate. And so you can drive that cap rate with the decisions that you're making. And so I liked having that kind of control. And when you go bigger, you have more opportunities to do that.
And a lot more control over your time because of the economies of scale. I mean, I have lunch with other real estate investors all the time, and I had lunch last week actually with an active investor that owns like a lot of small multifamily, and I mean, he was just like picking up that phone every 2 seconds, and I was just sitting there, eating lunch, talking to him and that sort of thing, and he stopped. He's like, how, like, you own a pretty big company. Like, how have you not been able to not take a phone call this entire time? Like, how are you able to like actually, hang out with your kids and actually hang out with them and be present with them, right? And go, and I was like, because this is what I do, and also I don't have to be busy chasing deals. Like, I was a deal junkie in the past, like, buying a deal each month, thinking I was busy, but I really wasn't effective. And we buy one deal a year. Like, that's it. You don't have to be too busy to buy one deal a year. There's a lot of work you have to do leading up into that. But when I put that work into, I want to get paid handsomely on the back end. So
that's right. That's 100% right. And it gives you the scalability too, to grow the team around you to support you so that you can put your phone on Do Not Disturb and actually have a lunch.
Now, I want to take some time too, because another unique part of your background is you were in real estate. You had some success in real estate, and you parlayed it into business. Like, tell me about that whole evolution, because that sounds absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, so it started with the real estate component, right? To my earlier comment, I would look at my P&L, and the most clear example at the beginning was the management part, right? Couldn't get good management, forcing us with on-site managers. Like, money was just leaking out everywhere. So that was the very first thing, right? We realized, let's take over the management of our assets and at the very least improve the performance of our property, which, by the way, shocker, when the owners are managing it, like, it does better, right? Um, and we quickly realized there's all sorts of like first off, we can do this for third parties as well because we've got a model, and our story rang true. We are owners first, so we operate an asset, whether it's for us or someone else, as if an owner would. But then we realized, looking at, like, again, the P&L, there's so many opportunities, right? We had a broker's license, so why not transact and bring agents on that would transact real estate for other investors? We would make commissions. It would feed the management arm. If these properties needed renovation, like, why are we paying a third party maintenance person, right? Like, let's own the construction. Look at all these lawns that we're now managing. Why aren't we cutting them, right? And so we had this kind of snowball effect to create this. And I just kind of got addicted and realized that running a business is a lot like running a multifamily property. You can drive the value. It's the effort you put in is what you get out. And so that led us to, we funded a flooring company that is in Atlanta to this day that services, about 3 hours in any one direction. Was part of an acquisition group that bought a couple manufacturing companies out of Idaho. Have attempted into the franchising world, some oil change concepts, some concrete concepts. Those two didn't work out. And then I've obviously started Nexus Point now, which my whole back office, by the way, in my real estate business was outsourced. And so I'm basically taking my model there and helping other entrepreneurs scale the same kind of model. So it's been a fun journey, and real estate was the launch pad for that.
Right. So what's the end game with these companies? Is it to, scale them up to $5-10 million in revenue and spin them off, or tell me about that?
Yeah, it really depends. I've actually seller financed back part of my real estate holdings to my other business partner, and have focused kind of on the flooring manufacturing, and then Nexus Point's my day-to-day focus. A lot of these companies do decent sized revenue. Our flooring company did, I think, 8 million last year. Our manufacturing businesses did about 25 million last year. Nexus Point's just kind of getting up and running over the last year, so we'll hit a couple million this year. I'm big on cash flow, right? Maybe it's my real estate background, and so what I really want to do is I want to create awesome services, right? Like, I care about, like, the name and the brand recognition and, like, what that means to a consumer. And I'm not that interested in a back end sale. I really want to just get it, have consistent cash flow. So to your point, I can hang out with my kids and go to lunches. And, if I want to work on a Friday, I work on a Friday. If I don't, well, I'm just not going to. So to me, it's all about that freedom. And I enjoy working. It's fun for me. Like, it's an outlet for me. It's a hobby for me in many ways. And so I never want to quit, but it would be nice to be able to kind of step back and, have that stability through the business cash flow.
Excellent. So, Mike, we're going to wrap it up because we're going to go back into the green room together and chat some more. So, what are your words of advice for those people that are in our target audience that may own a small portfolio of properties? Like, what are some things they can do, like, today, this week, this month, to position themselves into going bigger on their real estate deals?
Kind of two things. I've talked about this a couple of times. It's one, I think talking about what you're doing and what your intentions are is really important, because that's what will bring people to you, right? The second thing, I see this a lot with the younger folks, is like, they don't want to get out from behind their phone or their computer. They think that things happen from their couch, and they don't. It's like, you got to get out there and you got to meet people, and you've got to understand what value you can provide and what value you're seeking, and be very just clear on that. Jumping into a larger deal is not that intimidating as long as you have it well thought out and figured out. And so again, you'll spend just as much time on a smaller deal as you will a big deal. So don't be intimidated by it. And I guess the last thing is, you listen to podcasts and shows of people who have been there and done it. I remember when I was starting that, I could never do that. And the reality is, all of us who have started doing that are doing it just like everyone else. We just did it. So get off your couch and make it happen.
Excellent. That's money advice. So, Mike, we're going to go back in the green room here. If you guys are listening to this and you want to get on live Q&A sessions with our esteemed guests, if you want to get access to exclusive long-form training from myself and other real estate professionals, you got to get in on our exclusive Facebook group. It's called the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors Group. It's a closed group, but you can find it if you search for it and extend in a request to join, and I'll let you in and get a ton of value in addition to this show. So, Mike, I want to thank you so much for being on the show, and I look forward to talking to you in the green room, man.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks so much.
Peace, guys.